All right, so we're back for another deep dive, and this time it's all about prepping for those master's entrance exams. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on Day 3, Unit 1, sections 16 through 29, all those juicy English vocabulary words. And our mission, if you choose to accept it, is to really dissect these words, to understand them in a way that helps you remember them, beyond just rote memorization.
Absolutely, because just staring at a list of words, not the most exciting or effective way to learn, right? We're going to be your guides through this vocabulary jungle. We want you to not only be able to recognize these words, but also to understand their nuances, how they work grammatically, and to, actually use them with confidence, both in the exam and in your everyday life.
Exactly. So for each word, we'll break down the precise definition, how it functions. Is it a noun, a verb, an adjective? We'll look at examples both from, real-world situations and past exams. And we'll also give you some memory strategies that go beyond simple repetition. We're talking about roots, prefixes, suffixes, synonyms, antonyms, all those good things. Plus, we'll highlight those tricky parts, those common pitfalls that often trip students up in exams. So let's dive in. Let's start with this idea of a challenge. And what better word to kick things off with than appeal?
Appeal. A word with multiple personalities. It could be a noun or a verb, and its meaning shifts depending on the context. Let's start with the noun form. Imagine a community devastated by a flood. They might make an appeal for donations, right? It's a heartfelt request for help.
Right, like a call to action.
Exactly. But appeal can also wear a legal hat. Think of a defendant who's found guilty. They might file an appeal to a higher court, seeking to overturn that verdict.
So two very different scenarios, but both under the umbrella of appeal. And this duality continues when we look at the verb form, right?
Absolutely. You can appeal to someone for assistance, just like that flood-stricken community appealed for donations. Or, in a legal context, you can appeal a judgment.
But there's also that sense of being attractive, right? Like, this new phone has a lot of appeal for tech enthusiasts.
Precisely. That's the it factor, that magnetic pull. And that sense of attractiveness links to its adjective form, appealing. Something that has a strong appeal is naturally appealing. Now, for a memory trick, think of appeal as calling out. Whether it's a community calling out for help, a defendant calling out to a higher court, or something appealing, calling out to your interest.
I like that. So appeal is all about calling out in different ways. But here's a crucial point, especially for the exam. It's important to distinguish between the legal appeal, that formal process, and the more general sense of a plea, right?
Absolutely. The surrounding words, the context, will be your guide. They'll give you those vital clues to tell you which appeal is at play.
Context is king. Now let's move on to prosecute, a word that seems firmly rooted in the legal world.
It is. Prosecute, as a verb, means to officially charge someone with a crime and try to prove their guilt in court. So you might hear something like, the government decided to prosecute the company for violating environmental regulations. Think of that pro as moving forward, taking legal action.
Makes sense. Now here's a word that often gets tangled up with prosecute, and it's persecute. They sound similar, but their meanings are miles apart.
That they are. This is where understanding the nuances is crucial, especially for your exam. Prosecute, as we said, is a legal process. Persecute, on the other hand, means to treat someone unfairly or cruelly, often because of their beliefs or identity. It's about harmful treatment, not a legal procedure.
So officials might prosecute someone for breaking the law, but they might persecute a religious minority simply for being different.
Exactly. And if you're looking for a way to keep them straight, that in persecute can be a reminder of something persistent, something negative, like ongoing mistreatment.
That's a great tip. Now, the last word in this challenge trio is challenge itself. And this one, it can be quite a chameleon, taking on different roles depending on the context.
Absolutely. Challenge can be a noun or a verb. As a noun, think of a difficult problem that needs to be tackled, like eradicating poverty is a major global challenge. Or it can be an invitation to compete, to test your skills, like she issued a challenge to her rival in the chess tournament.
And it can also be about questioning something, right? Like they launched a legal challenge to the new law.
Exactly. And as a verb, to challenge reflects those same meanings. You can challenge someone to a game, you can challenge a claim, you can challenge the status quo. And that image of throwing down the gauntlet, it really captures that essence of a challenge, that bold act of confrontation or questioning.
It does. So exam-wise, remember to watch out for both noun and verb forms of challenge. And the context, those surrounding words, will tell you whether it's about a difficulty, a competition, or an act of disputing.
Right. They're all interconnected, but their specific use in a sentence will reveal the intended meaning.
Okay, we've tackled appeal, prosecute, and challenge. Let's shift gears and explore words that revolve around float, a more physical, movement-oriented group. Now, float itself, that seems pretty straightforward, wouldn't you say?
Generally, yes. Float, as a verb, describes that gentle resting or movement on the surface of a liquid or in the air without sinking. Picture leaves lazily floating on a pond, or a balloon floating across the sky.
Right, that effortless suspension. Now, a related word that students might encounter is afloat. It obviously has that float connection, but it also goes a bit deeper, doesn't it?
It does. While afloat can literally mean floating on water, imagine a shipwreck and some debris remains afloat, it also has a figurative meaning, and this is especially important in financial contexts. If a business is afloat, it means it has enough money to cover its expenses to keep operating. So, a new startup might struggle initially, but manage to stay afloat in those crucial early years. It's about financial viability, staying above water, so to speak.
Right, so it's that connection between physical buoyancy and financial stability. That's a great way to remember it. Okay, next in this group is drift. It also involves movement, but compared to float, it feels less controlled, more passive.
Exactly. Drift implies a passive movement, often driven by currents or wind, without a specific direction or control. Think of a sailboat with damaged sails. It might drift aimlessly on the water. Or smoke, it can drift across a room carried by air currents.
So unlike float, which can have a sense of intention, drift is more about being carried along by external forces.
Precisely. And in exam questions, they might test your understanding of this subtle difference between a deliberate float and a more passive drift. So pay close attention to the context.
Got it. Now let's move on to draft. And this word, it takes a turn away from physical movement and ventures into the realm of creation.
It does. Draft, as a noun, primarily refers to an early version of something written or planned. Think of the first draft of an essay, full of ideas but perhaps needing some organization and polishing. It's a preliminary sketch and outline. As a verb, to draft means to create such an initial version. You might draft a proposal before finalizing it.
So from floating on water to drafting on paper, quite the journey. Our next word is bill, a word with a few hats, a few different meanings.
Oh, definitely. The most common meaning of bill is a statement of money owed. That dreaded restaurant bill that sometimes exceeds expectations. But bill also refers to a proposed law, like a bill being debated in Parliament. And less commonly, it can be a poster or advertisement, like an old-fashioned playbill.
So when you encounter bill, make sure you're reading the room, so to speak, to figure out which meaning is at play. Context is key. And finally, in this float group, we have sketch, which brings us back to preliminary ideas, but this time in a visual sense.
Yes, sketch as a noun is all about a quick, rough drawing, often used as a starting point, a way to capture initial ideas. Think of an artist making several sketches before starting the final painting. It's about capturing the essence, the basic outlines, without getting bogged down in details. And while a draft is typically associated with writing, a sketch is usually visual.
Okay, so that wraps up our float group. We've explored float, afloat, drift, draft, bill, and sketch. Now let's move on to our next set, which focuses on words related to density and impact, starting with dense.
Dense, as an adjective, primarily means tightly packed or crowded. It's about things being close together, whether physically or metaphorically. You might talk about a dense forest with thick undergrowth or dense traffic during rush hour.
Right, packed in tight.
And figuratively, dense can describe something difficult to understand because it's loaded with information or complex ideas. Like a dense academic article that requires a lot of brain power to decipher.
Ah, yes, we've all encountered those.
Now, density, that's the noun form, referring to the state of being dense. And a common trap for exam takers is confusing the literal and figurative uses of dense. So always remember to check the context to see if it's about physical closeness or metaphorical complexity.
Got it. So from packed forests to packed paragraphs, dense covers a range of scenarios. Now, our next word, condense, builds upon this idea of density, but it introduces an action.
Precisely. Condense, as a verb, means to make something smaller or shorter by removing unnecessary parts. Imagine an author with a sprawling novel. They might condense it into a short story, preserving the essence but trimming the excess. Or in science, you have water vapor condensing to form clouds. It's about reducing, concentrating.
Right, taking something spread out and making it more compact, more focused. And that leads us nicely to our next word, compact.
Indeed. Compact, as an adjective, describes something that's closely and neatly packed together, often implying efficiency and smallness. You might choose a compact car for city driving, where space is at a premium. It's about making the most of limited space. And while similar to dense in suggesting closeness, compact often highlights that efficient arrangement, that intentional use of space, rather than just a high quantity.
Right, so dense is just packed. Condense is the act of packing down, and compact is the result, that efficiently small outcome. Now let's talk about impact, a word that packs a punch, so to speak.
Impact can be a noun or a verb, and it's all about force and effect. As a noun, it can refer to a literal collision, one thing striking against another, but more commonly it signifies a significant effect or influence, like the new policy had a huge impact on the company's profits. And as a verb, to impact means to hit forcefully or to have that strong effect on something. For a memory aid, just visualize a powerful collision leading to noticeable consequences.
It's a word with a definite sense of weight, of consequence. Now, our next word, influence, shares some similarities with impact in that it's about having an effect. But there are subtle differences, right?
Absolutely. Influence, like impact, can be a noun or a verb. As a noun, it's the power to affect someone or something or the person or thing that wields that power. Think of it like this. Social media has a massive influence on teenagers. Or she's a highly influential figure in the fashion world. And as a verb, to influence means to have that effect on someone or something. The derivative influential describes someone or something with a lot of influence. Now, the key distinction from impact is that impact often suggests a more immediate direct effect, a noticeable change, while influence can be more subtle, more gradual, more about shaping something over time.
So impact is often a sudden jolt, while influence is more of a guiding hand, a gradual shaping force. Now let's talk about exert, a word that often comes up when discussing power dynamics and effort.
Exert is a verb, and it means to use or apply something with effort. It's about actively putting something to work, whether it's physical strength, mental effort, or authority. You might say he had to exert all his strength to move the boulder, or the government exerted its authority to enforce the new regulations.
Right, it's about that conscious effort, that deliberate act of using something. Now, how does exert differ from influence? Because you can exert influence, but you don't necessarily have to actively use your influence to, have it.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. You actively exert something, but you passively possess influence. It's like having a tool in your toolbox. You don't have to be using it at all times, but it's there when you need it.
That's a great analogy. Now, our next word, powerful, is pretty self-explanatory. It's about having strength, influence, or impact, right?
It is. Powerful is an adjective that describes someone or something having great power, authority, or strength. It's a general term for having significant force or impact. You might talk about a powerful leader, a powerful engine, or a powerful argument.
Right. It's all about that capacity for strength and influence. And finally, in this set, we have fluctuate, a word that describes a specific kind of change.
Fluctuate, as a verb, means to change irregularly, to go up and down, to ebb and flow. Think of the stock market. Prices often fluctuate daily. Or someone's mood, it can fluctuate throughout the day, depending on various factors. And the noun form is fluctuation, referring to that irregular variation.
So it's about change with a bit of unpredictability, a bit of movement back and forth, rather than a steady, consistent trend.
Precisely.
Okay, that gives us a solid grasp of the dense to fluctuate group. Let's move on to our next cluster of words, and this one starts with democratic and leads to harness. Now, democratic, that's a pretty important term, especially in discussions about governance and systems of power.
Absolutely. Democratic, as an adjective, relates to the concept of democracy, a system of government where the people hold the power, typically exercised through elected representatives. So you might hear about a country holding democratic elections. And of course, the noun form is democracy, the system itself.
Right, a fundamental concept. Now, our next word, scratch, seems a bit out of place in this group. What's the connection here?
Well, it might simply be the natural progression through the vocabulary list. Scratch is a common word with a few meanings. As a noun, it's a mark or a slight injury caused by scraping something, like the cat left a scratch on my arm.
Ouch.
And as a verb, to scratch means to rub with your nails or claws, like a dog scratching behind its ear. Or it can mean to make a mark by scraping something, so it's a more physical, tactile word.
Okay, from democracy to dog scratches, we're covering a lot of ground here. Now let's talk about harness. This word has an interesting origin, and it's developed a really useful metaphorical meaning.
It has. Harness originally referred to the straps and equipment used to control a horse or another working animal. And as a verb, to harness literally means to put that harness on an animal. But these days, it's more commonly used metaphorically to mean controlling and making use of something, particularly a natural resource or a source of energy. Like, scientists are working to harness solar power, or we need to harness the creativity of our team.
So it's that shift from the literal control of an animal to the figurative control of resources and even talents.
Exactly. And if you're looking for a way to remember its broader usage, just picture that image of a harness, controlling and directing power for a specific purpose.
That's helpful. Okay, let's move on to our next group, which starts with vote and ends with jealous. This set seems to be all about choices, decisions, and the emotions that can swirl around them. Vote itself, that's pretty straightforward, right?
It is. Vote is at the heart of democratic processes. As a noun, it's a formal expression of choice, typically in an election, like every citizen has the right to cast their vote. And as a verb, to vote means to make that choice, to participate in that decision-making process.
Simple enough. Now we have veto, another word tied to systems of power and decision-making. But this one's about the power to block something.
Exactly. Veto can be both a noun and a verb. As a noun, it's the power to reject a proposal or a law, like the president has the power of veto. And as a verb, to veto means to exercise that power, to say no, like the president vetoed the bill.
Right. It's a crucial check and balance in many political systems. Now let's move on to deny. This one is about refusal, isn't it?
It is. Deny, as a verb, means to state that something is not true, or to refuse to admit something, like he denied the allegations. Or it can mean to refuse to give someone something they want, like the request for funding was denied, and the noun form is denial. The act of denying.
So you can deny a fact, a request, or an accusation. Now what about levy? This one often pops up in discussions about taxes and finances.
Levy can be both a noun and a verb. As a noun, it's an amount of money, like a tax, that's imposed by an authority. And as a verb, to levy means to impose or collect that tax, like the government decided to levy a new tax on luxury goods. It's all about that official act of imposing a financial charge.
Right, governments love to levy taxes. Now our next two words, envy and jealous, these are emotions that students often get mixed up. Can you help us unravel them?
I can. Both envy and jealous involve those icky feelings of wanting what someone else has or fearing that someone might take what you have. But they have subtle differences. Envy is purely about wanting what someone else possesses. As a noun, it's that yearning, that longing, like she felt a pang of envy when she saw her friend's new car. And as a verb, to envy is to feel that longing.
So envy is wanting what someone else has. Now how does jealous fit into this?
Jealous, as an adjective, goes a bit further. It implies resentment towards someone because of their success, their possessions, or their perceived advantages. And it often involves a fear of losing something you already have. Like, he was jealous of his brother's promotion. The noun form is jealousy. So the key difference is this. Envy is purely about wanting what others have, while jealous often includes that element of threat, that fear of losing what's yours, or that resentment towards someone's good fortune.
That's a great way to distinguish them. Envy is about longing, and jealous adds that layer of resentment or fear of loss. Now let's move on to our next set, which seems to revolve around performance, drama, and communication. And we'll start with drama itself.
Drama, as a noun, primarily refers to plays or theatrical performances, like going to the theater to see a drama. But it can also describe a situation in real life that's full of excitement, emotion, or conflict, like there was a lot of drama surrounding the celebrity breakup.
Right, those situations that feel like they're ripped from a soap opera.
Exactly. And someone who writes plays, they're called a dramatist.
Makes sense. Now, from drama, we get dramatic, an adjective that can describe both theatrical performances and impactful events in the real world.
Absolutely. Dramatic, as an adjective, can mean relating to drama or theater, or it can describe something that's striking, intense, noticeable, like the rescue mission was a dramatic success, or there's been a dramatic increase in online shopping. The adverb form is dramatically, and it describes the manner in which something happens.
So dramatic implies a strong impact, a visual element, something that grabs your attention. Now, what about drastic? It sounds similar, but it feels more extreme, more forceful.
You're right. Drastic as an adjective means severe, extreme, radical. It's about actions or changes that have a major impact, often sudden and forceful, like the company had to take drastic measures to avoid bankruptcy. So for your exam, remember this. Dramatic focuses on impact, on visual aspects, on drawing attention, while drastic emphasizes severity, forcefulness, and the scale of the change.
Right, dramatic is about grabbing your attention, while drastic is about shaking things up. Now, let's talk about tragedy and comedy, those two pillars of storytelling, those classic genres that explore the full spectrum of human experience.
Indeed. Tragedy, as a noun, is a play or a story with sad events and a sorrowful or disastrous ending, often involving the downfall of the main character. It can also refer to a real-life event that's deeply sad or unfortunate, like the earthquake was a terrible tragedy, and the adjective is tragic. Now, comedy, on the other hand, is all about laughter, amusement, and finding humor in life's absurdities. As a noun, it's a play, a movie, or a show intended to make people laugh, and the adjective is comic.
Those two fundamental ways of looking at life and telling stories. Now, let's move on to declare, a word that's all about making something known, about stating something publicly and officially.
Declare, as a verb, means to announce something formally, to state something clearly and firmly, like the government declared a state of emergency, or she declared her candidacy for president. And the noun form is declaration, the act of declaring something or a formal statement.
So it's a very official, deliberate act of communication. Now, finally in this group, we have advertise, a word that's all about attracting attention, often for commercial purposes.
Absolutely. Advertise, as a verb, means to promote a product, a service, or an event, to encourage people to buy it, use it, or attend it. Like they advertised a new product on television. And the noun form is advertisement, that message designed to grab your attention. And someone who advertises is an advertiser.
Right. From billboards to social media ads, it's all about getting the word out, about promoting something. Okay, let's move on to our next set of words. And this one explores the realm of tiredness and moisture. And we'll start with exhaust, a word that has multiple meanings, all related to depletion and fatigue.
Exhaust is a versatile word. As a verb, it can mean to make someone very tired, to wear them out completely, like the marathon exhausted the runners. It can also mean to use something up entirely, like we exhausted our food supplies during the camping trip. Now, as a noun, exhaust refers to those waste gases expelled from an engine, like car exhaust. And as an adjective, it can mean extremely tired, totally spent.
So it covers both using something up and feeling used up.
Exactly. And there are a couple of related words that students might encounter. Exhausted, as an adjective, describes that feeling of being completely drained, worn out. And exhausting, also an adjective, describes something that causes that state of exhaustion.
Okay, so exhaust is about depletion, whether it's energy, resources, or even patience. Now, what about fatigue? It's specifically about that feeling of tiredness, isn't it?
It is. Fatigue as a noun is that feeling of extreme tiredness, that weariness that can be caused by physical exertion, mental strain, or even illness. Like one of the symptoms of the flu is fatigue.
Right, that bone-deep tiredness. Now, we have another word for tiredness. Weary. How does it differ from fatigue?
Weary can be an adjective or a verb. As an adjective, it means tired, especially after a lot of effort, either physical or mental, like she felt weary after a long day of work. And it can also have a sense of being tired of something, not just physically tired, like he was weary of the constant arguments. Now, as a verb, to weary means to make someone tired or to become tired, and the noun form is weariness. So while all three words relate to tiredness, there are subtle distinctions. Exhaust often implies complete depletion, like you're running on empty. Fatigue is a state of weariness, often from exertion, and weary can also carry that sense of being tired of something, of being fed up or bored.
Right, so weary adds that extra layer of emotional or mental tiredness. Now let's switch gears completely and talk about render. This one seems to have a variety of meanings.
It does. Render, as a verb, can mean to cause someone or something to be in a particular state, like the storm rendered the bridge unusable. It can also mean to provide a service or to give help, like the organization rendered assistance to the refugees. And it can mean to express or perform something artistically, like she rendered the song beautifully. So it's about making something happen, providing something, or expressing something.
Right, it's a multifaceted word. Now let's dive into some words related to moisture, starting with moist.
Moist is an adjective that describes something that's slightly wet, often in a pleasant way, like the cake was moist and delicious. The noun form is moisture, referring to that presence of water or liquid. And a moisturizer is a cream or lotion designed to add moisture to the skin.
Right, that desirable level of dampness. Now, how about damp? It also describes something that's slightly wet, but it often has a less pleasant connotation.
You're right. Damp, as an adjective, describes something that's slightly wet, often in an unpleasant way, like the basement was cold and damp. As a noun, damp refers to that unpleasant moisture. And as a verb, to dampen means to make something slightly wet, or it can mean to reduce the intensity or enthusiasm of something, like the bad news dampened their spirits.
Right, so damp is that chilly, unwelcome moisture, while moist is more about that pleasant level of hydration. Now, what about dump? It can be associated with liquids, but its main meaning is about getting rid of something, right?
Exactly. Dump, as a noun, is a place for discarding waste, like a garbage dump. And as a verb, to dump means to get rid of something unwanted, often carelessly, like he dumped his old clothes in the donation bin. While it can relate to liquids in the sense of pouring something out like dumping water, its primary meaning is about disposal.
Okay, so dump is about getting rid of things, not necessarily about moisture. Now, finally, in this moisture-related group, we have humid. This describes a specific type of atmospheric moisture, right?
It does. Humid, as an adjective, describes air that's heavy with moisture, often making it feel hot and sticky. Like the weather in the tropics is often hot and humid. It's all about that high level of water vapor in the air.
Right, that thick, heavy air that can make you feel like you're wading through soup. Okay, we've navigated the world of tiredness and moisture. Let's move on to our final set of words for this deep dive. And this group delves into emotions related to self-esteem, pride, and humor, starting with humiliate.
Humiliate, as a verb, means to make someone feel ashamed or foolish, to damage their pride or dignity, like he was humiliated when he tripped and fell in front of everyone. The adjective is humiliating and the noun is humiliation, that state of feeling ashamed or embarrassed.
Right, not a fun experience. Now, our next word, humanity, it shares a root with humiliate, but its meaning is quite different.
Very different. Humanity, as a noun, refers to all human beings as a collective, the human race. Like, we must work together to protect the future of humanity. It can also refer to those qualities that are considered good and compassionate, like kindness, empathy, and understanding.
So it's both the group of all humans and those positive qualities that we associate with being human.
Exactly. And that leads us to our next word, humane, which is directly related to those positive qualities of humanity.
Right, humane as an adjective describes someone or something that shows kindness, compassion, and mercy. Like, the organization is dedicated to promoting humane treatment of animals. And the opposite of humane is inhumane, meaning cruel or lacking in compassion. Okay, so humane is about treating others with kindness and respect. Now, what about humble? This one seems to be about having a certain attitude towards oneself.
It is. Humble, as an adjective, describes someone who's not proud or arrogant, who has a modest view of their own importance. Like, despite her success, she remained humble and grounded. It can also mean simple or unassuming.
Right, the opposite of being boastful or self-important. Now, finally, in this group, we have humor, or humor in British English, and its related adjective.
Humor, as a noun, is the quality of being funny or amusing, the ability to appreciate and express the absurd or the incongruous, and the adjective humorous or humorous describes someone or something that possesses that quality of being funny.
Right, that ability to find the funny side of things, to make people laugh. Now, for our last set of words for this deep dive, we'll focus on those pesky errors and those sometimes helpful defaults, starting with error itself.
Error, as a noun, is simply a mistake, something that's incorrect or wrong, like there was an error in the calculation. The adjective form is erroneous, meaning containing an error or being incorrect.
A general term for something gone wrong. Now, what about fault? It also relates to mistakes, but it often suggests a sense of responsibility or blame, doesn't it?
It does. Fault, as a noun, can mean responsibility for a mistake or wrongdoing, like, it was my fault that we missed the train. Or it can refer to a flaw or defect in something, like, there was a fault in the electrical wiring. And the adjective form is faulty, meaning having faults or defects. So the key difference is this. Error is a general term for a mistake, while fault often implies responsibility or a specific defect.
So error is just a mistake, while fault adds that layer of blame or flaw in something. Now, finally, we have default, a word that has become increasingly common in the digital age.
It has. Default, as an aim, can mean a failure to fulfill an obligation, especially a financial one, like the company is in default on its loan payments. It can also refer to a standard setting or option, like the default settings on the software are usually fine. Now, as a verb, to default means to fail to fulfill an obligation or to revert to a standard setting.
So it can mean failing to meet a commitment or sticking with the preset option.
Precisely.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into this section of your vocabulary list. We've explored a range of words, from the challenges of appeals and prosecutions to the nuances of density, impact, and influence, from the depths of exhaustion to the dampness of humidity, and from the sting of humiliation to the joy of humor.
We've aimed to give you more than just definitions. We've looked at examples, explored memory techniques, and highlighted common pitfalls to watch out for in your exams.
And we hope that by discussing these words in context, you'll feel more confident not only recognizing them, but also using them effectively, both in your studies and in your everyday life.